Welcome to the 30-Day Challenge. Now, when we coach our employees, often what we hear when we're coaching or when we learn about coaching as managers and leaders, our first thought is, I got to fix stuff. I got to correct what's wrong. And that's pretty typical. And that's not always a bad thing either. But I want to open you to something, a 30-day challenge. Let me share where this came from. Recently, I was talking to a manager at one of our client sites. High resistance, high D in the DISC spectrum, always believes you should be challenging people, fixing things, correcting them, motivating them through you better perform or else. And I am not criticizing any of that. What I would share, though, is I don't think people are motivated solely by constructive feedback. I don't think people are motivated by being challenged all the time based on what they're not doing well. It's human nature. So I had a conversation with this client, good guy, loyal, very knowledgeable in his industry, and he was not getting the success that he wanted. And I asked him a really fundamental question. I said, how much longer do you have in your career? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, how much longer do you have? He said, about 20 years. I said, okay, I'm going to ask for 30 days of that 20 years, and I want to challenge you. Now, before I go further, let me explain, while that came off like I was shooting from the hip, there's a strategy behind it. 20 years versus 30 days. I want to challenge you, which goes to ego. I knew he wasn't going to back down. I said, I want to challenge you for 30 days to do some things that are unlike you've ever done them before. And at the end, if you don't think that they've worked, I will never ask you to coach again. I want you to prove me wrong, but you have to be honest and filled with high integrity in terms of what you've observed. Now, let me explain what I just did. I didn't ask how you feel. I didn't ask if you agree with it, but I want you to share what you've observed. So I've planted a seed. And I want you to do it, but I want you to prove me wrong. But you have to be honest about your observation. So he took the challenge. Now, the reason I gave that challenge is he didn't want to coach. Didn't agree with progress coaching. Didn't agree with the things that we were bringing up. Didn't want to do it. Really didn't think it was within his style or wheelhouse. He doesn't believe in this soft, cuddly, raising people with praise and being positive. That's just not who he is. And he's actually a really great guy. So you notice I haven't mentioned his name. He would not let me because he's still uncomfortable. But let me walk you through what happened. So we had this conversation, brought up the 30 days out of 20 years. I want you to prove me wrong. I want you to challenge me, but I want you to be honest and filled with integrity, which I knew he had a high dose of based on what you observe. So he said, what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to bring somebody into your office once a day for 30 seconds. That's all I'm asking. So you notice what I'm doing? I'm minimizing the commitment level. Bring them in and you just have to praise them once. Then I want you to send one card weekly. It could be to one of your employees. It could be to a coworker. It could be to another manager in your organization. But once a week, I want you to call an employee into your office and I want your boss to be sitting there. And I want you to only praise that employee. And then at your next staff meeting, only once, I want you to ask an employee of one thing that they liked about another employee's idea or something that they did. And he said, okay, why am I doing this? I said, because I want you to be honest on what you observe, not how you feel. Because I knew I was battling 2 decades of high resistance, high D in the DISC spectrum, high driver. That wasn't going to change because I showed up for 30 days. But if I could use the power of observation as my motivation tool, as my teaching tool, then it was less about me convincing him as a person. So I asked him a question. I said, would you mind if I crossed a line with you? He said, sure. I said, I understand your son plays sports. He said, yes, he does. I said, do you coach him? He said, no, I don't. I don't have time, but I go to all his games. I said, oh, that's awesome. Do you give him feedback on the way home? He said, absolutely. And you could feel his strength come right across the desk. I said, that's awesome. I said, what do you say? So I coach him on the things he did wrong. I said, okay. I said, do you mind if I put in a 5th challenge into your 30-day challenge? He said, what's that? I said, you cannot provide your son constructive feedback for 30 days. You can only look at him and say, I'm really proud of the way you played today. I'm really proud of the way you competed. No results, no conversation, no feedback, no insight on the results or lack of results. He said, why? I said, do you mind if I share a study with you? He said, sure. The Positive Coaching Alliance reports in their national study of kids who go through youth sports, the number one thing they hated about youth sports was the drive home with the parents. Because guess what we do? He said, probably what I just told you I was doing. I said, absolutely. Number one thing they loved is when the grandparents came. I said, look, I'm not saying you're wrong, but what I would like you to do is just tell me when you look in that rearview mirror what you see when you give that positive feedback. So about 45 days later, we sit down and he's reluctant. He is not wanting to have this conversation. And I said, what did you learn? He said, what do you mean? I said, what did you learn? I mean, what did you observe? Well, to be honest with you, Tim, I actually had an employee come into my office and say, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? And it was at that moment I realized the way I made people feel. He said, I still don't agree with this. I still don't 100% feel comfortable, but that comment hit me. I was providing positive praise, and my own employees thought there was something wrong with me. And he goes, that bothered me. He said, I'm not there, but I get what you're getting at. And I said, again, I'm going to go to the personal thing, and again, I'm crossing a line. He said, no. My son and I talk a lot more. I said, interesting, isn't it? He goes, yeah. He goes, but I have to ask you, when do I give the constructive feedback? And I said, all the time. But he said, let me ask you a question and be honest. Don't you think we earn the right? Don't you think we have a greater impact when we invest in the good things? Because they'll trust the constructive things more? Completely different tone. He goes, yeah, I see that. I noticed a difference in my employees. He goes, I felt horribly uncomfortable doing this. I said, I get it. I said, I'll share something with you. When I need to point things out that are wrong and really give constructive feedback, I can get uncomfortable because I'm pretty strength-based. Maybe you and I can meet in the middle somewhere. And we started to laugh. He started to laugh. Let me repeat that. He started to laugh. And that's what really changes the way we look at things. I never once asked him for emotional buy-in. I never once had the conversation on why coaching works, because I know it works. Deep down, he probably knows it works. But I had to coach and challenge him on his terms. Remember? Prove me wrong. Only 30 days out of the next 20 years. I only want you to spend 30 seconds a day. I only want you to bring people in once a week with your boss. So I didn't ask for a huge commitment. I minimized it. And he's becoming a better coach. Is he fighting it? Absolutely. Is he still a high D on the disc spectrum? Absolutely. Is he a high driver? Absolutely. And I wouldn't ask him to change that. But what he did and what I did is I used the power of observation. That was the distractor. To what? To why he didn't want to do it. So when he said an employee came in and said, are you feeling okay? He said, I couldn't believe it. I was being positive and people thought there was something wrong with me. He goes, that really bothered me. And I said, that's okay. It'll take us time. We'll get there. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm asking you to deploy some other strategies to support who you are. He actually thanked me. Now, I'm not praising myself here, but I want you to think about those people in your organization who are resistant. Think of the strategies I used, and I hope it helped. Thanks.